Welcome to Faith in Practice, presented by Higher Powered Sports, PT, the podcast where faith meets everyday life and vocational calling. Each episode, your host, Kurt Kessler, and his guest will explore how to live out your faith in your work, relationships, and daily challenges. Let's grow together and discover how to live out your faith with passion and purpose. Let's get started.
Hey there, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Faith in Practice. Today I'm going to tell a little story about how God used one of my friends to teach me a very important lesson. My friend's name is Ian Stout. He's a year younger than me, but we played basketball against each other growing up. Dropped 36 points on his team in fourth grade. Had to throw that dig in there for him. Shout out Logan Crowell, 15 assists. But we grew up together, and we played basketball together in high school. We have pretty similar values, similar personalities in terms of the way we prefer to be coached, especially in high school. His mom is a very respected physical therapist, small business owner, and educator in the physical therapy world. And I remember it was senior night for basketball my senior year. And, you walk across the court with your parents. They say a little bit about you and what you're going on to do. And I had put in there that I was going to Bloomsburg University for pre-physical therapy. And after that game, his mom approached me as she owned a few small PT practices in our area. And she just basically offered to kind of help guide me a little bit as I pursued that. And so I ended up working for her as a PT tech for 3 summers. And I learned a lot, just how the physical therapy world works. It was really just dipping my toe into the great big ocean of physical therapy. But I learned so much from her and just from working there. I learned a little bit about professionalism, which was not all the way there at age 18. During one of those summers, I got to help Ian during his first ACL rehab. And then during our lunch break, I would go downstairs with him where he was resting, and we would watch Shark Week together and got to give him some company during his recovery. And so then all through this, my first year at Bloomsburg, I've outlined on the first episode of this podcast that my first year at Bloomsburg didn't really go well. I didn't like it. I wasn't doing well there for a number of reasons. And really, once I learned that the pre-PT program was vastly different than what an actual PT program was, I started looking to try to transfer into a PT program. And with Ian's mom's help, we were able to talk to a few different colleges, set up some visits, and I learned that it's pretty much impossible to transfer into a PT program if you weren't already accepted out of high school. So then we started brainstorming about other options, and Ian was going to Marywood University for athletic training. And so that was my introduction to Marywood. She really helped get me involved there and was able to get me transferred in a short amount of time, and was really just the catalyst to that transition in my education. So we both got to Marywood. It was almost like my freshman year was a wash. Some of my classes transferred, but really not for the purpose of the athletic training program. So it was almost like I was starting out as a super freshman. So Ian and I were in all the same classes. We both had the same professional goals. We both wanted to now go for athletic training and then further our education in physical therapy to become physical therapists. And it was just a really great friendship because as I transferred from Bloomsburg and left all of my closest friends behind, Ian became just like the person I did everything with at college. We had almost all the same classes together. We'd work out together. We'd play basketball together during the years where he wasn't on the team up there. We'd study together. Well, he studied while I was often distracted. I had to throw that in there for him because I'm sure he'll remind me. We both had very good grades. We both did really well in the clinical setting. And it's almost like we competed against each other on tests, like who's going to get the higher grade or who's going to get the higher score or whatever. We were helping each other and, like I said, kind of studying together, but really just pulling each other along. And it was a great friendship during those years at Marywood. Then the time came where our time together at Marywood was ending. We were both pursuing PT school. Neither one of us planned on working full-time as an athletic trainer. We just kind of saw athletic training or the athletic training degree as a really solid background in working with athletes and something very similar to PT, and then using that degree to apply to PT schools. So we applied to PT schools. He got into Slippery Rock on his first try, and I got denied there and everywhere else for 4 years. And so during those 4 years, I asked myself, what the heck is going on here? We had pretty much the same resume. Our grades were very similar. The only difference was that my freshman year at Bloomsburg was being counted and weighing a little bit of that down. But we had very good grades. Then each passing year, my resume got stronger because I ended up having to work in athletic training for those 4 years. I did half of my hours at a high school in athletic training. And then the other half of my hours was working as an athletic trainer in the PT clinic. So I had amassed over 3,000 work hours that was padding my resume, and I still could not get into PT school. And so I fell into this trap of comparing my situation to his, comparing my life and career path to his. And while it never affected our friendship, it really affected my mindset. After 3 years, he had graduated PT school to start his career as a PT, and I was still trying to get in. It just didn't seem fair. And there didn't seem to be any explanation for it. I wasn't getting much feedback from the schools that were denying me, other than my GRE scores were 2 points below what they tend to look at. And it just got to be so frustrating. And if I'm looking through this spiritually, it would be fair to say that I didn't have my full trust, or at least the perspective of understanding, the understanding of patience and what God was trying to do in my life, because I kept seeing Ian's path as the right path, or the only path, or the path to get to the goal of becoming a physical therapist. So there were a lot of times I did not appreciate the waiting. I did not have the patience at times. And you heard me say this on this podcast several times about, how my dad would at times question my motives, or question, continue to go down this path, pursuing physical therapy. And so it was almost like that balance of, I knew this was my passion, I knew this was my purpose, but I was just so frustrated because it felt like there was nothing else I could do. And to see someone who had gone right along with me down the same path, and when we split, his went straight to the goal and mine took all these twists and turns that I didn't appreciate. And so along the way, somewhere along the way, there's not a specific moment where, I had an epiphany or anything like that, but somewhere along the way I heard this quote, and it's very mainstream, but again, it's very applicable, and I kind of clung to it, and that is, comparison is the thief of joy. And that was so true in my life, because the more I compared myself and my life and my path to Ian's, the more unhappy I became with my own life, or with my own purpose, or with the way that things were playing out in my life, instead of trying to learn and appreciate what God was trying to do. Now, to be fair, I didn't know what God was trying to do, but that's where faith comes in. That's the whole point of faith, is believing when we can't see. So I eventually learned that it is fruitless to compare myself to others, even though it seems natural sometimes in those situations. And I should say, we both interviewed well, we both have good personal skills, but it just didn't seem right to me for the longest time. And so you end up in these traps of wishing you were someone else, or wishing things would break for you like they did for someone else. And so I started internalizing, what is wrong with me? God must have made a mistake. God must have, forgotten about me or something. But once I realized and learned not to compare myself to others, I was able to completely shed that burden. And now I am able to live freely with, one, the trust that God's plan is greater than my own and that he will deliver, and two, appreciation that God has brought me through this, taught me lessons from it to better myself, and will continue to do so in all areas of my life. I keep saying that comparison is the thief of joy, or don't compare yourself to others. But what I have found really beneficial is comparing myself today to myself yesterday, or myself last year, or myself 5 years ago, because that's where you can truly see and appreciate the growth. That's where you can look back and see where God was working and how God developed you and what God was showing you in these more challenging seasons. And I'll also say it's just so easy to do this in retrospect, because when you're in it, you can't necessarily see the pieces lining up, for that door to open for you. You can't see what God's doing in other people's lives to prepare your path. You can't see or possibly know what's around the corner for you, especially in these moments. But again, that's where producing the spiritual endurance needed, or learning the spiritual endurance, or learning to rely on God when you can't figure things out. When you can't see the path in front of you, you can't see the forest through the trees. And so for me, it just really, really ripened that fruit in my life to the point where now I'm able to talk about it with you and with athletes that I talk to at the school that are either going through something or can't see through their future, and just being able to use that experience that God gave me, not only to better myself, but to better other people, hopefully, in his name and in his honor. As I continue to grow into adulthood, the temptation of comparison is always there. Who has a bigger house? Who has a nicer car? Who makes more money at work? Who does whatever? Who has seemingly a happier relationship with their kids or their spouse or whatever it may be? The temptation is always there to compare yourself or to compare what you have. But just about everything that I said there is a material thing. And even the more feeling-based things that I described fall even just a little bit short, because you just never know what's going on behind the curtains in someone else's life. So the take-home message there is just feeling appreciation for what God has given, realizing that not everyone's path is meant to be the same, and at a bare minimum, in retrospect, but hopefully you can appreciate the steps that are being taken in your life to prepare you for whatever is next, no matter what stage of life you're in.
It's time for Word Up.
All right, for Word Up today, we're going to do a couple different passages from the Bible. I found maybe 6 different instances at minimum where someone from the Bible was comparing their situation to someone else's and what God taught them through that. So let's just run through a couple of these real quick. The first one is Peter comparing himself to John. Both of them were disciples of Jesus. This is from John chapter 21, verses 20 and 22. Peter turned and saw the disciple whom Jesus loved following them. When Peter saw him, he asked the Lord, "What about him?" Jesus answered, "If I want him to remain alive until I return, what is that to you? You must follow me." The lesson there, Peter was comparing his future to John's, and Jesus gently rebuked him, essentially saying, focus on your own path. Don't worry about others' stories. This reminds us that God's plan for each person is unique, and comparison distracts us from our personal calling. The second example, Martha comparing herself to Mary. This passage comes from Luke chapter 10, verses 38 to 42. "Lord, don't you care that my sister has left me to do the work by myself? Tell her to help me." "Martha, Martha," the Lord answered, "you are worried and upset about many things, but few things are needed, or indeed, only one." The lesson, Martha compared her busy service to Mary's stillness at Jesus' feet. Jesus didn't condemn her, but corrected her perspective. Being with him was the better part, or the better way to spend that time. God used this to teach Martha and the rest of us about priorities in spiritual life, relationships over performance. And the last example that I'll share today, The prodigal son's older brother. This is Luke chapter 15, verses 25 to 32. The main quote here: "All these years I've been slaving for you, yet you never gave me even a young goat so I could celebrate with my friends." This is in response to the prodigal's father when the prodigal came home or returned home, ordered to kill the fatty calf to celebrate his return. Prodigal son's older brother, who had been with the father and the family all this time working, never strayed from him. "All these years I've been slaving for you, yet you never gave me even a young goat so I could celebrate with my friends." The lesson here is that the older brother compared his obedience to his brother's failures, and God, working through their father, uses this moment to reveal that grace isn't earned and that God's generosity to someone else doesn't diminish his love for us or anybody else. Comparison blinded the younger brother to the blessings that he already had. Some of the big take-home messages here: comparison often leads to envy, resentment, or distraction. We saw that in each of those verses. Jealousy, looking at someone else and what they're doing, or just being distracted by anything else that's going on around you instead of finding our focus, finding our purpose, and finding appreciation in following God. God also redirects our focus to his unique plan for our lives. You could ask me now which path I would rather take, Ian's or my own, and I would choose myself every time. And that's not because Ian's path wasn't great, but because now I have appreciation for what God was doing, the ways that he used me and grew me and shaped me, and I have trust in the way that he's going to continue to do so. Another takeaway here: grace, mercy, and calling are not earned by comparison, but they're given to us freely by God. We don't have to earn them. In fact, we can't earn them. But that is the grace and that is the beauty that is given to us as believers and followers of Christ. Just remember, anybody listening here, each person's journey with God is different. Comparing yours to mine, or yours to someone else's, or mine to Ian's, that is going to distort our view of God's goodness and God's plan. But that's an opportunity for Satan to easily attack and creep in and try to change our hearts to distract us from what God is really doing in our lives. Just as a current update, Ian now owns his own cash-based PT practice in northeastern Pennsylvania area, and he started a year or so before I started mine. And he served as one of my best resources as I started the process for myself. So I'm very thankful for him, very thankful for his friendship over the years, and that continues today. And I'm thankful for the way that God used him in my life, even though I had no idea that that is what God was teaching me through him until very recently. It's just one of those funny ways that God works, and hindsight is 20/20. But it's just funny how this whole time God had been using him and planning him to help me in my life. Take a second and think, is there something in your heart that's going on? Is there some kind of comparison that you're making to yourself or to someone else? And what is that really doing to you? Is that helpful or is that not helpful for you? That answer is up to you to decide. But I'm here to tell you that just draw a little bit closer to God and see what he's saying to you through this. See how he's using you through this. And you might see that starts to melt away and you become more and more appreciative, more and more satisfied with what is happening in your own life. That's going to do it for today's episode. Thanks to all for listening. If you want to find ways to connect, you can always do so in the show notes or find me on Instagram at Higher Power Sports PT. Thanks. We'll see you next time.
Thanks for joining us for today's episode of Faith in Practice. We hope you found inspiration and practical wisdom to help you live out your faith on and off of life's playing fields. If today's conversation resonated with you, be sure to subscribe, rate, and review. Your support helps us continue sharing stories and insights that empower you to align your faith with your vocation. For more resources or to connect with us, visit hpsportspt.com. That's hpsportspt.com. Remember, your faith isn't just a part of your week, it's a part of your life. Let your light shine.